with Vanessa Beeley. Watch this space.
Then to retaliate, that makes that decision, and we don't have a president. And if we don't have a president, it should be the entire cabinet, the government, that should make that decision. But apparently they just got together, and they happen to be both Muslims. So our friendly Christians in the nation were very much, and rightfully, if I may, not happy.
Rate, or the rate of about 3-4 years ago, he was earning $2,000 a month. He's now earning $120 a month because he stayed in Lebanese tunnels. Good reason that it came to Damascus to seek cooperation.
About Smotrich and Ben Gvir, with a new set of results. So the elections over certain issues, therefore, half the term was now the head leader of prime minister because he lost in the Zionist entity of protest. No, it started way before that. We are entering on week 16 of protests. So it's been months of protests, but they have been increasing dramatically over the past couple of weeks. But the issue is, let's just remind people what happened in the Zionist entity last year when there was an election, and actually there were two elections, and the third one had Netanyahu as prime minister because he lost in the second elections. That was in the first elections that happened, he lost. There was an opposition. There was Yair Lapid, and who is now the head leader of the opposition, that was prime minister, along with also Benny Gantz. They both interchanged prime minister for half the term each. And then after that, there was an election where Netanyahu lost. But then they repeated the elections over certain issues that are depending on the number of votes, and a lot of issues because Netanyahu didn't like the results. So they repeated the elections. But when they repeated the elections, Netanyahu was had a coalition with a new set of extremists, because according to me, they are all extremists, but a new set of extremists that are way far more deadly and irrational than the current extremists, which were head by Yair Lapid. And we're talking about Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And these people, Ben Gvir was actually placed in jail because of extremism, because he attempted to kill an Israeli persona because of his views on the political issues inside of Israel. But the issue is farther than that, because when that coalition happened, it means that Netanyahu had to sell them something, give them something in order for them to give him votes. Added to that, some of the left that actually liked Netanyahu also voted for him. So when the cabinet was formed and the alliance was formed and the Knesset started convening to take to vote over laws and whatnot, the left that voted for Netanyahu realized that there are things happening that are being said and that are being done that they don't approve of. So they joined the already protests that were happening with the led by Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, who are the opposition in the Zionist entity, or considered the left. But again, when I say left and right, please, they are all right for me. I am a Levantine, a Lebanese Southern woman. They are all left. They are all colonizers. They all should leave. But I'm just explaining what's going on.
Yeah.
So when that happened, and they just backed off from supporting Netanyahu, and they joined the protests. The issue that brought more people to the streets in the occupied Palestinian territories in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, was a proposal by Netanyahu's government that would allow a majority, I think like a 61 majority of the 120 seats inside the Knesset, to basically just override almost any Supreme Court ruling in the entity. And that would also allow politicians to appoint the justices, the judges, to the bench. So you can just imagine what can happen. And that was proposed by people like, for example, Yariv Levin, who is the justice minister in the entity, and by a religious Zionist La La Land man named Rothman. They both chair Knesset, the Knesset Law and Justice Committee, which is why they proposed this law. And it was spearheaded by Netanyahu, and it was obviously loved by Netanyahu because there are a lot of corruption cases against Netanyahu and his entire family, even his wife. So Netanyahu would love to see the Supreme Court go so he wouldn't go to jail the same way that Olmert went to jail. And this way he would help and appoint the judges that he would trust for them not to put him in jail. So both men who proposed this, they already had great hatred for the Supreme Court inside the Israeli entity, because it was that Supreme Court that it was actually that took the decision back in 2005 to withdraw from the Gaza Strip, to get out of the Gaza Strip. So it was because the Mizrahi population, which is basically the Jews that originate from the region of West Asia, whom the Supreme Court is usually, according to what they say, the Mizrahis say, the Supreme Court is usually biased against them. So these people did not want to leave Gaza. They wanted to stay there, and they want to keep killing the Palestinian people. So they already have a bad experience with, from their position, with the Supreme Court inside of the Israeli entity, which is a civil court. It's not a religious court. And what these two people want, what Rothman and also Levine want, they want for the Zionists who are ultra religious to take control of the Supreme Court, of the judicial system in general inside the Zionist entity. So I mean, let's put it into perspective. Everyone that saw this happening, they were sure that these measures would help Netanyahu evade any sort of prosecution in all of his corruption cases, and it will just deny all they would drop the charges. They wouldn't even go to court. And add to that, which basically, if you remember Netanyahu's trial cases, they triggered more than 3 years, I think 3 or 4 years of political crisis inside of the entity, and there was a split inside of the entity that began, the real split began then. That led into the failure of the first and the second elections for Netanyahu. And within the power of the Supreme Court as well, because the people in the Supreme Court who are, by the way, part of the political left of the opposition inside of Israel, they were talking against the full annexation of the occupied West Bank, which the right want to do it. They want to kill as much as they want of the Palestinian natives and drive them out of the West Bank and build illegal colonial settlers there. But the left wanted to just cut the cost and stop anything that's coming from the West Bank, because over the past 3 years the West Bank has had a completely new maneuver in how to resist the occupation by adopting a full-fledged armed resistance that we had not seen since 2002. So the left wanted to end this politically, but the right wanted to go all in and just kill as much as possible. Yeah. Also, religiously speaking, the left is pro-LGBTQ legislation. They want to make it legal for same-sex people to get married inside of the entity, and that's a huge, big no for the religious Zionists. And they were trying to put some laws to protect women's rights, because what people don't know is that women have no rights in the far extreme Jewish religion. They keep, it's funny that people talk about Islamophobia, the fact that it's absolutely nonsense. As a free Muslim, you know how free I am. I don't need to tell you. But they don't know that the far right extreme Zionist project is against women's rights, so and minority rights. Because if you haven't seen the video of one of the protesters getting his behind beaten so bad because he dared wave a Palestinian flag because he wants to help solve this issue politically, he was beaten up by the people who were protesting with him, not only the people protesting against him. Yeah. So it's a big controversial issue inside of the entity. So all of that amounted into what we saw, I think, according to Khan TV, it was 750,000 people in the streets, colonial settlers in the streets of Jaffa, occupied Tel Aviv, in Palestine. And that's something that has never been seen. It's unprecedented in the history of this occupation entity. And that not only affected people, not only affected universities that are right now they are on full strike. They not only affected council members who are now on a hunger strike. I think they stopped the hunger strike after Netanyahu said that he's backing down from from these reforms. I'll talk about it later. But not only that, it's also at the level of the army, the occupation forces. You have army pilots who refused to fly Netanyahu anywhere. You have army personnel, generals, who refuse to go back to their posts because they don't approve of the reforms that Netanyahu and his cult want to impose on the occupation settlers. And you have conflicting struggle inside of the army itself, which is basically the only backbone holding what is known as Israel together. Which is why that specific thing that happened right after Netanyahu dismissed the war minister of the entity. I don't want to say the wrong name, but I think his name is Yoav, if I'm not mistaken. But after he dismissed him, the people went out of their mind. The army just said, no, we are not going to take this. We had military reservists saying that we're not coming back. You had many allies of the Israeli entity itself across the world express alarm. I mean, the US, for the love of God, expressed concern over the direction in which the entity was heading. And you had their president, Isaac Herzog, saying time and again that if the house gets burned, it's going to fall on everyone's head. And after the dismissal of Yoav Gallant, his name is Gallant, Yoav Gallant, what they call the defense minister, what I call, and everyone who's sane calls the war minister, that appears to have changed the entire equation. Netanyahu fired Gallant over his opposition to the proposal. It sparked one of the most dramatic nights in Israeli history. You can see it in the thread that I started. It was so nice for me to write that. I was waiting for that for weeks, but it was every second there was a new thing coming up, and it was crazy. And although the media reported that Netanyahu will be willing to cut a deal, but he appeared to be basically a hostage in the hands, and it's because of him. He made that. He put himself in that position. He became, the media is now portraying Netanyahu as a hostage in the hands of the far right partners in his coalition, and they think that would actually bring down the government. But and yet Netanyahu, instead of basically backing off and saying, okay, I'm going to stop the reforms, he said, I am now pausing the reforms. I'm going to wait till the new term of the Knesset. This term, until this term ends, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to wait till the upcoming term. That was unacceptable by both sides. His coalition said, no, we're not going to pause it. We're going to continue with it. And the people on the ground said, no, we don't believe you. I mean, we don't want it to be paused. We want it to end right here and now. So no one trusts him from both sides right now. And other members of his coalition, they have just reiterated, they have emphasized their determination to pass the most important parts of this legislation before the Knesset breaks up by the Jewish Passover holiday, which is supposed to be on April 2nd, which is supposed to be next week. So we're going to see another week of craziness inside of the Zionist entity. And I've been told by Palestinian friends in the occupied 48 territories that they are afraid of one thing. They are very much glad that this is happening, because this shows the world what kind of crazy people are running the show in the Zionist entity, and how they are always, whether they are protesting or not, because over the past days, the number of people killed by the Zionist entity in the occupied West Bank increased. Even during that, they were still killing Palestinian people. But their main concern was that they know for sure that now the only option for Netanyahu would be to try to externalize the crisis, either starting something with the West Bank, or moving forward and starting something with Gaza, or even worse, picking on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, look, if the latter happens, uh it would be the highlight of my life, because that would be spelling the end of the Zionist entity. But I'm so concerned and afraid that he will be forcing the army to externalize the problem into the Gaza Strip, the biggest open prison on earth. And the Palestinians are sick and tired, and we are sick and tired of watching them die without being able to do anything for them. So he might try to do this, but I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't know if some of the army members who disapprove of him will follow suit. But when it's about the Palestinians, all the Zionists are far right extremists. I don't know if I've covered everything, but
And watch this space. Remember, your engagement through a like, share, or sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission. Truthfully go where no news will have been going before.